The first time I saw the dress, it was breathing. That is the only word that fits. Not moving, breathing. The fabric rose and fell in slow, patient rhythms, like a chest beneath pale skin. I stood frozen in the doorway of my grandmother's attic, dust thick in my throat, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam hovered over lace yellowed by time, silk stiff with age, and a veil that hung like a shroud over an invisible face. I told myself it was the light. Or the draft. Or my imagination, already strained by grief and exhaustion. But the attic was sealed. No windows open. No wind. And the dress did not stop. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, had been dead for exactly 7 days. 7, an ugly number that clung to me since the funeral. The house had passed to me because I was the only one strong enough to carry it, according to her will. No one else wanted it. No one else ever did. Whitmore House sat at the edge of a forgotten town in Massachusetts, its reputation heavy enough to rot interest before it could form. I had come back to sell it. That was the lie I kept repeating. The attic smelled of old wood and something sour underneath, like flowers left too long in water. I climbed the last step and felt the air change instantly. Thicker. Warmer. As if the house was holding its breath with me. The dress stood on a headless mannequin in the center of the room, arranged deliberately, almost reverently. White, once. Now it was the color of bone. The bodice was hand-stitched, intricate patterns woven into the fabric, looping symbols that looked floral until you stared too long and realized they were wrong. Too sharp. Too intentional. My name slid into my thoughts uninvited. Clara. I hadn't said it out loud, but the sound of it filled my skull anyway. I took a step closer. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I laughed nervously, the sound cracking in the stale air. Get it together, I whispered. It's a dress. But my reflection caught in the dusty mirror leaning against the far wall, and I wasn't alone in it. For a split second, a woman stood behind me. She was tall and impossibly thin, her face hidden beneath a veil that bled shadows instead of light. Her hands rested on my shoulders, fingers elongated, bridal rings fused into her skin like growths. Her mouth stretched too wide beneath the veil, smiling. I spun around, heart slamming into my ribs. Nothing. Just the dress. Waiting. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a trunk at my feet. Its lid was half open, as if someone had abandoned it mid-thought. Inside were photographs, old, curling at the edges. Women in wedding gowns. Dozens of them. Different eras. Different faces. Same house. Same dress. My pulse quickened as I picked one up. A bride stood on the front steps, bouquet clutched tightly, eyes hollow. On the back, written in my grandmother's sharp script. Margaret Hale, 1923. Another. Ruth Collins, 1947. Another. And Whitmore, 1971. I swallowed hard. And Whitmore was my mother. The attic creaked above me, slow and deliberate, like footsteps pacing. My skin prickled as memory stirred, memories I didn't remember living. The smell of flowers. The weight of fabric pressing into my shoulders. Whispered voices repeating the same word over and over. Bride. I backed away from the mannequin, shaking. This isn't funny, I said, though I didn't know who I was speaking to. I'm not staying. The light flickered. The dress exhaled. I watched, horrified, as the veil shifted on its own, lifting just enough to reveal what lay beneath. There was no face. Only darkness, thick, endless, and moving. Something inside it opened, like a mouth learning how to smile. Images flooded my mind violently, without permission. A ceremony in the basement, candles lining stone walls. A circle carved into the floor. A woman screaming, not from pain, but from knowing. Hands forcing her into the dress as it tightened, fused, drank her warmth. A vow spoken not to a man, but to the house itself. A promise sealed in blood and breath. One bride must remain so the house may stand. I dropped the photograph and ran. The attic door slammed shut behind me with bone-rattling force. The house groaned in satisfaction. As I pounded on the door, breath tearing from my lungs, a soft voice drifted through the wood, old, loving, familiar. My grandmother's voice. "Don't be afraid, Clara," it crooned. "Every woman before you was afraid too." The lock clicked open on its own. Behind me, fabric whispered. And something began to breathe again. The door opened, but I didn't move. My hands were still pressed flat against the attic door, fingers numb, pulse pounding so violently I thought it might tear through my skin. The lock had turned by itself. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't heard breathing. And yet the house felt awake now, alert, like an animal that had noticed prey stop struggling. Slowly, I turned. The attic was unchanged. The mannequin stood where it always had. The dress was still. Perfectly still. No rising, no falling. Just dead fabric draped over a dead shape. I laughed again, sharper this time, on the edge of hysteria. "I'm done," I said. "I'm not playing this game." The house answered with a creak that rippled downward through the beams, traveling deep into its body. A long, low sound, almost pleased. I didn't go back into the attic. I couldn't. I grabbed my bag from the hallway and retreated down the narrow staircase, every step echoing too loudly, like the house was counting them. By the time I reached the first floor, my legs were trembling so badly I had to grip the banister to stay upright. The smell hit me again. Flowers left to rot. Whitmore House had always smelled that way. As a child, I thought all old houses did. Now I knew better. This wasn't age, it was waiting. Something preserved too long. I moved through the living room, avoiding the covered mirrors, the furniture draped in sheets like bodies laid out for burial. My grandmother had insisted they remain covered. "So it doesn't get confused," she used to say. I never asked what it was. Night pressed against the windows, thick and absolute. I checked my phone. No signal. I collapsed onto the couch without turning on the lights, shoes still on, heart racing long after my eyes closed. When I dreamed, I wasn't myself. I stood barefoot in the basement, stone cold beneath my feet. Candles burned in a circle around me, their flames bending inward as if bowing. Women stood along the walls, faces hidden beneath veils, hands clasped in prayer, or mourning. The dress waited in the center. I knew it belonged to me. A voice echoed from everywhere at once, deep and feminine and ancient. "You were chosen long before you were born." The dress lifted, floating toward me without touch. The bodice opened like ribs spreading apart, welcoming. Hungry. I screamed myself awake. The house answered. A low moan traveled through the walls, vibrating the floor beneath me. The lights flickered on by themselves, revealing the living room in sickly yellow flashes. The sheets covering the furniture shifted, slowly, deliberately, as if something underneath them was breathing. I bolted upright. The clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. And someone was standing at the far end of the room. She wore a wedding dress. Not the dress, but one just as wrong. Her veil was thinner, almost transparent, and beneath it her face was stretched and pale, eyes sunken deep into blackened sockets. Her mouth opened slightly, as if trying to remember how to speak. "Don't," I whispered. She stepped closer. The floor didn't creak beneath her feet. Her hands lifted, fingers trembling, reaching for me. I noticed the seams along her wrists, dark, uneven, like stitches forced through flesh. She takes, the woman rasped. She keeps. I shook my head violently. You're not real. Her face twisted, not into anger, but into grief so profound it felt like it cracked the air. I was, she said. Before the dress. The lights went out. I screamed. When they came back on, she was gone. Only wet footprints remained on the wooden floor, leading toward the basement door. I didn't follow them. Morning arrived reluctantly, gray and thin. I hadn't slept again. I spent the early hours pacing, checking doors, windows, everything sealed. Everything locked. Just like the attic. By mid-morning, I found myself standing in my grandmother's bedroom. The room was immaculate. Untouched. Preserved. Her journal lay on the bedside table. I don't remember picking it up. The pages were brittle, filled with cramped handwriting that grew shakier the further I read. The house requires a bride. It must be willing, or broken into willingness. Bloodline strengthens the bond. Refusal leads to rot. My stomach turned. The final entry was dated the week before her death. Clara has returned. The house remembers her. Behind me, the bedroom door creaked open. I felt it before I heard it, the pull, the pressure, the subtle tightening around my chest, like invisible hands measuring me. From somewhere deep within the house, fabric whispered. And beneath it, softer, more intimate. A heartbeat that wasn't mine. I didn't turn around. That was the first rule my body remembered before my mind could catch up: don't turn around when the house is breathing. My grandmother used to say it casually, like advice about crossing the street. I thought it was one of her strange jokes. Now, with that unfamiliar heartbeat thudding behind the walls, I finally understood. Clara, the house whispered. It wasn't a voice exactly. It was pressure. A vibration that pressed the sound of my name directly into my bones. The bedroom door stood open, wider than it had been a moment ago, its shadow stretching toward me like a reaching arm. I stepped away from the bed. The journal slid off the bedside table on its own and landed open at my feet. The last page trembled, then flipped. New ink bled into the paper. Do not run. The house will only follow faster. I gagged and kicked the journal away. You don't get to tell me what to do, I said aloud, my voice shaking. Saying you felt wrong. Too personal. Too intimate. The walls answered. A soft scraping sound began, slow, rhythmic, wet. It came from inside the walls themselves, moving along the interior like something crawling between the studs. I backed into the hallway, heart hammering so violently my vision blurred. Then the scratching stopped. A knock sounded instead. Not from the door. From inside the wall beside me. 3 slow taps. I screamed and ran. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, doors multiplying where there had only ever been 3. I passed rooms I didn't recognize, nurseries with empty cribs, bedrooms with mirrors uncovered and watching, closets packed with yellowed veils and dried bouquets that crumbled as I brushed past. The house was rearranging itself. I slammed into the bathroom and locked the door, collapsing against it as something heavy shifted on the other side. The mirror above the sink was uncovered. I stared at it despite myself. My reflection stared back, but it was wrong. The woman in the mirror wore a wedding dress. The fabric clung to her skin like it had grown there, veins visible beneath the lace. Her hair was pinned back with rusted hairpins, and her eyes, my eyes, were rimmed and red, hollowed by exhaustion and terror. She smiled. I did not. You look better this way, she said, her voice layered with others beneath it, older voices, cracked and desperate. She always makes us beautiful. I raised my hands. She raised hers a second too late. No, I whispered. You're not me. Her smile widened until the corners of her mouth split, skin tearing soundlessly. Not yet. The mirror shattered outward. Glass exploded into the room, embedding itself into the walls, the floor, into me. I screamed as pain bloomed across my arms and cheek. When I looked down, the cuts weren't bleeding. They were threaded. Fine black stitches pulled themselves through my skin, closing the wounds with precise, practiced movements. I tore at them, sobbing, but the stitches held. From beyond the bathroom door came a sound I recognized now. Fabric dragging across wood. "She's coming," a voice whispered from the drain beneath the sink. A woman's voice, thin and broken. "She wears us when she walks." The door handle began to turn. I climbed out the window. The fall knocked the air from my lungs, but pain was grounding. Real. I staggered into the yard, gasping, staring up at Whitmore House as if seeing it for the first time. The windows were full of women. They pressed their faces against the glass, veils fluttering, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. Some were young. Some were old. All of them wore the dress, or versions of it, altered by time and decay. At the highest window, in the attic, stood the mannequin. Only it wasn't headless anymore. A face had formed where none had been before, smooth, pale, and unmistakably familiar. My mother's face. Her eyes met mine. And she nodded. I ran until my lungs burned, until the house vanished behind the trees, but the pressure never left. No matter how far I went, I could feel it tugging at me, like a thread wrapped around my ribs. I reached the edge of town by dusk. The gas station lights buzzed overhead, fluorescent and harsh. I collapsed onto the curb, shaking, drawing stares from strangers who didn't ask questions. Inside the bathroom, I splashed water on my face and finally let myself look. The stitches were still there. More had appeared. Delicate, bridal seams tracing my shoulders, my spine, measuring. Preparing. Behind me, in the mirror's reflection, a woman stood patiently. Not close. Not touching. Waiting. "She always brings them back," the woman said softly. "Every bride runs." I spun around. The bathroom was empty. But in the mirror, the veil drifted closer to my face. And deep beneath the hum of electricity and traffic and living people who didn't know what waited for them, I heard the house call me home. I did not go home. That was the promise I made to myself as I locked myself inside a cheap roadside motel on the edge of town, the kind that smelled like bleach and old smoke and desperation. I pushed a chair under the door handle, drew the curtains tight, and left every light on. I told myself that houses couldn't follow you. That whatever Whitmore House was, it was bound to the land. To the wood and stone and rot. I told myself many things. None of them stopped the pressure in my chest. It pulsed now, rhythmic and deliberate, like fingers tightening and loosening around my heart. Not painful. Not yet. Possessive. I barely slept. When I did, it came in fragments, thin, fragile things that broke apart the moment I touched them. Each time I drifted off, I felt fabric brushing my skin. Each time I woke, I found new stitches. By morning, they traced my collarbones. I stood in the bathroom, gripping the sink so hard my knuckles went white. The stitches weren't crude anymore. They were beautiful, tiny, precise, almost loving. Whoever, or whatever, was sewing me knew my body intimately. Knew where to pull tight. Where to leave room to breathe. "You don't own me," I whispered to my reflection. Something behind the mirror laughed. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It sounded like silk sliding over skin. The motel TV turned on by itself. Static cleared into an image I didn't recognize at first. A black and white photograph of Whitmore House, pristine and new, surrounded by smiling townsfolk. A wedding banner hung across the front porch. Congratulations to the bride. The image flickered. The bride stepped forward. She wasn't wearing the dress yet. She wore a simple white slip, her hair loose down her back. She looked terrified. She looked young. She looked exactly like me. I said no, I screamed, hurling the remote across the room. The screen went black. The silence afterward felt deliberate. Expectant. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps. Not on the door. On my chest. I doubled over, gasping as something tightened inside me. The pressure became heat, spreading, blooming, shaping itself into something new. My ribs ached. My shoulders burned. I clawed at my skin as the sensation crawled upward, weaving, threading, binding. A voice spoke inside me, not loud but absolute. Engagement precedes union. No, I sobbed. I'm not agreeing to anything. The air grew heavy. Sweet. The smell of rotting flowers filled the room. The closet door creaked open. A box slid out on its own, stopping at my feet. White. Ornate. Tied with a yellowed ribbon. I shook my head violently, backing away until I hit the wall. I don't want it. The ribbon untied itself. Inside the box lay a ring. Gold, dull with age, engraved with looping symbols identical to those stitched into the dress. As I stared, they shifted subtly, rearranging themselves into something that almost resembled words. To have. To hold. To remain. The ring lifted. I screamed as it slid onto my finger, burning cold as it settled into place. The skin around it tightened instantly, swelling, sealing. The ring became part of me. The pressure in my chest eased. That terrified me more than the pain. From the corner of the room, a woman stepped forward. She wore the dress. Up close, it was worse. The fabric wasn't fabric, it was layered skin, pale and translucent, stitched together with hundreds of different hands. Faces pressed faintly beneath the surface, mouths open in eternal, silent vows. The veil lifted. There was no single face beneath it. There were many. They spoke together. You are promised now. I slid down the wall, shaking. I didn't say yes. The bride knelt in front of me, movements slow and ceremonial. You were born into yes, she whispered. Consent is a courtesy. Blood is a contract. She reached out and touched my stitched skin. Memories poured into me, their memories. The moment of realization. The begging. The way the house closed its doors. The way resistance softened into acceptance, then into devotion, then into nothing at all. They live in me, the bride said softly. And soon, you will too. The room warped, folding inward like fabric being gathered. Walls stretched, peeling away, revealing stone beneath. Candles flared to life around us. The basement. I was back in Whitmore House. I lay at the center of the circle, my body heavy, unresponsive. Women stood along the walls, dozens of them, watching with hollow reverence. The bride rose. The dress floated from her body, unfolding in the air like a living thing. It hovered above me, shadows writhing beneath its lace. This is the last step, she said gently. After this, you won't be afraid anymore. The dress descended. I screamed, not with my mouth, but with everything inside me. And somewhere, far away but unmistakably close, Whitmore House exhaled. And began preparing for its wedding. I woke screaming, but the sound never left my throat. It stayed trapped inside me, vibrating uselessly against ribs that would not expand. My body lay flat against cold stone, arms pressed to my sides, legs straightened and bound by invisible force. The basement ceiling loomed above me, lower than it had ever been, its beams bowed inward like a ribcage closing around a heart. Candles circled me. Not wax, bone. Long, pale shafts melted slowly, dripping something darker than wax onto the carved floor. The symbols etched into the stone pulsed faintly, responding to each drop like veins drinking blood. The dress hovered inches above my skin. Up close, there was no denying what it was made of. Skin layered upon skin, stretched thin and translucent, stitched together with hair, sinew, and thread pulled from veins. Beneath the surface, shapes shifted. Faces rolling slowly as if trapped under ice, mouths opening and closing in silent rehearsal. I tried to move. My body did not respond. "This is the fitting," a voice whispered, not aloud, but everywhere. Inside my skull. Inside my spine. Inside the stitches that now webbed my skin. The bride stood at my feet. She no longer wore the dress. Without it, she was wrong, unfinished. Her body looked hollowed, as though something essential had been removed and replaced with air. Her skin sagged, her joints bent at incorrect angles, and her face could not decide what it was. It shifted as I watched, my mother, my grandmother, the woman from the gas station bathroom, strangers from photographs, each expression bleeding into the next. "Please," I tried to say. The word never formed. She smiled anyway. "Every bride begs during the fitting," she said kindly. "It means you still belong to yourself." Her hands lifted. They passed through the dress and into me. There was no pain at first. Only pressure, firm, intimate, invasive. Fingers traced my ribs from the inside, counting, measuring, adjusting. Something tugged at my shoulders, stretching them wider. My hips burned as unseen hands reshaped bone with careful precision. I screamed silently as my body was altered, not violently, not cruelly, but meticulously. Like tailoring. "You're almost perfect," the bride murmured. "The house has high standards." The women along the walls began to hum. It was not a melody. It was a vow. Their mouths opened, and breath poured out, not air, but words layered over words, spoken in dozens of voices across decades. "I take the house. I keep the house. I remain." The dress descended. It did not fall, it settled, sinking into my skin as if my body had always been hollow, waiting for it. The bodice fused to my chest, tightening with each shallow breath until breathing felt optional. Sleeves slid over my arms, stitching themselves closed as they went. I felt everything. Every needle. Every pull of thread. The veil brushed my face, and the moment it touched my eyes, I saw them all. Every bride. Every fitting. Every scream swallowed by stone. I saw my mother on this same floor, nails broken and bleeding as the dress took her. I saw my grandmother standing where the bride stood now, her face still her own, still resisting as the house whispered promises of purpose and peace. I saw the moment each woman stopped fighting. Not because they wanted to. Because the dress made fighting tiring. Made resistance feel like drowning. Made surrender feel like rest. Something inside me softened. The house felt it. The pressure eased slightly, like a lover loosening their grip just enough to encourage trust. "Yes," it whispered. "No," I tried again. The dress tightened. Agony bloomed, sharp, corrective, immediate. The message was clear, wrong answer. The bride leaned down until her shifting face hovered inches from mine. "You can hate it," she said gently. "You can fear it. But you cannot refuse it." She placed a hand over my heart. It stopped. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like something being dimmed. In the silence that followed, I felt the house step into me. Not possession, occupation. It filled the hollow spaces, the cracks grief and fear had made, settling in with patient satisfaction. I felt its age. Its hunger. Its endless, aching loneliness. And for one horrifying moment, I understood it. The house did not kill its brides. It kept them. It loved them the only way it knew how. The humming swelled. The dress finished sealing itself, the final stitch pulling tight at the base of my throat. Breath returned in shallow, obedient gasps. The bride straightened. "It's done," she announced. The women along the walls bowed. The candles flared bright, then extinguished all at once. Darkness swallowed the basement. When light returned, I was standing. Not lying. Standing in front of a mirror that had not been there before. The woman reflected back at me was breathtaking. Her skin glowed pale and flawless, every seam hidden beneath elegant lace. The dress fit her perfectly. The veil framed her face like a promise. Her eyes were still mine. They were screaming. Behind her reflection, the house loomed, not around her, but within her. Beams where bones should be. Walls where ribs belonged. The bride stepped into the mirror beside me. She smiled, finally stable, finally whole. "Welcome," she said. And inside my chest, something ancient and patient whispered back. "At last." The house rang like a bell. Not a sound, a feeling. A deep reverberation that traveled through my stitched skin and settled into my bones. With each pulse, the seams beneath the dress tightened, reminding me where I ended and where the house began. I stood in the basement mirror, breathing shallow, practiced breaths, while the other bride, the former bride, I realized, watched me with serene approval. "You'll feel lighter once the ceremony begins," she said. "The waiting is the worst part." "I won't do it," I whispered. She tilted her head, studying me with pity. "You already are." The mirror rippled. Stone replaced glass. The basement expanded, stretching far beyond its original boundaries, transforming into something cathedral-like, arches rising impossibly high, walls layered with names carved one over another, thousands deep. Candles flared to life along the aisle, illuminating rows of women standing shoulder to shoulder. All brides. Some were solid. Some were thin as smoke. Others looked half-remembered, their features blurred, as if time itself had begun to forget them. They turned as one when I took my first step forward. I didn't remember choosing to walk. The dress moved me. With each step, memories fell away, not ripped out, not erased, just loosened. My childhood bedroom. The sound of my mother laughing. The exact shade of my favorite color. They drifted backward like guests leaving early, unimportant now. Panic flared. I tried to hold on to something. Anything, but the house pressed gently inward, soothing, persuasive. "You don't need those anymore," it murmured. "I will remember for you." At the altar stood no man. There was no priest. There was only the house. Its presence condensed there, thick and undeniable, forming a shape that suggested architecture rather than flesh, pillars folding inward, beams bending into something like shoulders, shadows pooling into the vague outline of a head bowed in expectation. The former bride took her place beside it. I stopped. At the center of the circle, heart stuttering against the house's steady rhythm inside me. The humming began again. This time, it wasn't a vow. It was a lullaby. "You were chosen," the chorus whispered. "You were shaped. You were kept." The house leaned closer. The air smelled of dust and flowers and iron. "Do you accept the keeping?" it asked. The words weren't spoken aloud. They unfolded inside me, already half-written in the spaces the house had hollowed out. I felt the answer forming. Not because I wanted it to. Because the dress was tightening around my throat again, reminding me of consequences. "No," I forced out. The house paused. For the first time since this began, it hesitated. The candles flickered violently. The walls shuddered. A crack split the stone floor beneath my feet, and from it poured sound, screams layered over screams, all the voices that had ever said no. The former bride winced. "Careful," she warned. "It doesn't like reminders." The house straightened. The pressure returned, heavier now, less patient. "Refusal is decay," it said. "Decay leads to abandonment." Images slammed into me, rooms collapsing, beams rotting, walls caving in on themselves. I felt the house's terror, raw and ancient, a fear older than any human one. It was afraid of being alone. "You don't need me," I gasped. "You survived before me." "I endured," the house replied. "Endurance is not survival." The women around us began to sway, their forms flickering. Some clutched their heads, others their chests, as if my refusal was unraveling them. The former bride turned to me sharply. "Stop," she hissed. "You'll tear it apart." "Good," I said. The word burned. The house recoiled. For a heartbeat, just one, I felt the seams loosen. I ran. The aisle distorted beneath my feet, stretching and folding, but I forced myself forward, tearing through resistance that screamed like ripping cloth. The dress resisted me now, pulling backward, trying to guide me back into place. "No," I shouted, finding my voice at last. "I am not your foundation." The walls began to bleed. Cracks spiderwebbed outward, names splitting in half, letters screaming as they broke apart. Brides collapsed into dust, into shadows, into memory. The house roared. Not in anger. In pain. I reached the far end of the cathedral basement and slammed my hands against the wall. Stone softened beneath my touch, becoming wood, then air. A doorway opened. Cold night rushed in. I stumbled through, and fell. I landed hard on the front lawn of Whitmore House. The real one. The night was silent. The house loomed behind me, intact, dark, its windows empty. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the front door creaked open. The former bride stepped onto the porch, her shape already unraveling, edges fraying like burned fabric. "You can't leave it without a bride," she said weakly. "It will follow you." "I know," I replied, standing unsteadily. The door slammed shut. The house shuddered, then went still. I looked down at myself. The dress was still there. The stitches still held. Inside my chest, the house was quiet, but not gone. It was waiting. Learning. And somewhere deep within me, beneath terror and defiance, something new stirred. Not surrender. Preparation. The house did not chase me. That was the first sign something was wrong. Days passed. Then weeks. I left town before dawn, driving until the road signs blurred and my hands went numb on the steering wheel. I slept in crowded places, bus stations, hospitals, cafes that never closed. I surrounded myself with noise, with people, with light. And still, every night, I dreamed of walls. Not Whitmore House exactly, something worse. In the dreams, buildings leaned toward me as I passed. Hallways stretched longer than they should. Doors appeared where there had been none. I would wake with the taste of dust in my mouth and the faint smell of rotting flowers clinging to my clothes. The dress never left me. It changed. By day, it hid itself, sinking beneath my skin, its seams dissolving into faint scars that traced my body like old memories. By night, it returned in full, heavy, warm, intimate. I would wake wrapped in it, breath shallow, heart beating in time with something else. The house had learned patience. I felt it then, not as pressure, not as hunger, but as attention. Wherever I stayed too long, things began to shift. Pipes knocked in unfamiliar rhythms. Floors creaked in answer to my footsteps. Mirrors fogged when I passed, even when no steam lingered. Old buildings recognized me. They leaned closer. I finally understood the truth my grandmother had never written down. The house didn't need Whitmore House anymore. It had me. The realization came quietly, on an ordinary afternoon, in an apartment I had rented under a false name. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. Laughter drifted in from the street below. I stood in the kitchen, holding a glass of water, when the walls sighed. Just once. Contented. A crack appeared above the doorway, not from stress, not from age. From growth. The plaster split like skin stretching too far, and beneath it I saw wood that pulsed gently, warmly. I dropped the glass. It shattered, but the sound felt distant. No, I whispered. The answer came from inside my chest. You said you would not be my foundation. I didn't say yes, I breathed. You didn't have to. The apartment groaned softly, the sound intimate and pleased. The crack widened. The floor beneath my feet warmed. I sank to my knees. This was the ending the other brides never reached. They had been contained, kept within walls, sealed into rooms and rituals. I was mobile. I was alive. I was contagious. That night, I returned to Whitmore House. Not because it called me. Because I called it. The house stood exactly as I had left it, dark and waiting, its windows like empty eyes. When I stepped onto the porch, the front door opened without a sound. Inside, the air was thick with relief. You followed me, I said aloud. The house didn't deny it. I walked to the basement, each step steady, deliberate. Candles ignited as I passed, bone-white flames bowing in acknowledgement. The circle waited, cracked but intact, the names carved into the stone whispering softly. I won't be your bride, I said, standing at the center. Not like them. The house listened. I won't stay, I continued. I won't be sealed. I won't be hidden. The walls creaked uneasily. But I won't run either. Silence fell. I placed my hand over my heart, over the place where the house slept inside me. I felt its fear then, raw and exposed. Fear of emptiness. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of collapse. You don't need to keep us, I said gently. You need to let go. The dress surfaced, spreading across my skin in a ripple of lace and memory. It resisted, not violently, but desperately. If I release you, the house whispered, I will fall. Yes, I said. You will. The candles flickered wildly. I'll take you with me, I added. But not as a prison. Not as a hunger. I closed my eyes. And I pulled. Pain unlike anything I had known tore through me, not physical, not emotional, but structural. It felt like ripping a building out of the earth, stone by stone, beam by beam. The house screamed as it detached, not in rage, but in grief. Walls collapsed inward. Names shattered. The dress unraveled, threads snapping, faces beneath it finally dissolving into nothing. Whitmore House folded in on itself, not burning, not exploding, unmaking. Stone softened to dust. Wood rotted in seconds. Foundations cracked and sank. When it was over, nothing remained but an empty lot and a cold wind. I lay on the ground, gasping, body aching, skin bare. Inside me, something shifted. The house was still there, but smaller now. Quieter. No longer a structure. A memory. A seed. I stood slowly. Weeks later, I moved again. A new city. A new name. I chose a place with no history, no creaking bones, no old walls whispering their needs. I work with buildings now. I restore them. I listen when they speak. Some are lonely. Some are afraid. Some are breaking. I don't let them take me. But sometimes, only sometimes, I let them rest. And when I pass a house that breathes a little too deeply, that watches a little too closely, I feel the faint tug of lace beneath my skin and hear a soft, familiar whisper. Bride. I smile. Not anymore, I say. But in the reflection of dark windows, I sometimes see a veil flutter. And I know the house is still learning what love means. Without possession.